I can't believe my wife is cheating on me with him. What's even more infuriating is that she doesn't even feel guilty. I caught her, and all she said was that she wants to date other people, claiming I wouldn't understand anyway because I'm too boring for her, a weakling. Boring? I'll show her boring. I'll show her just how boring I am when I handle her cousin's panties right in front of everyone. I'll make her suffer, make her beg me to come back. But let me start this story from the very beginning. It started with yoga. Or at least that's what she said it was. My wife and I have been married for 5 years, and in that time we've been through more than our fair share of ups and downs. When we first got together, we were that couple everyone envied. Completely in sync, finishing each other's sentences and always laughing at some inside joke. But marriage isn't all sunshine, and by year 2 we were already hitting bumps. Her family had always been a bit intense. Her mother was the type to criticize everything. My job, our house, even the way I folded towels wrong. Her dad, on the other hand, was old-school strict and didn't trust me from the start. They caused more fights between us than I'd like to admit. I thought about walking away more than once, especially after her mother made a scene at our wedding reception because the centerpiece flowers weren't the right shade of white. But I loved her. Then there was the miscarriage 2 years in. That one nearly broke us. She blamed herself. I blamed myself for not knowing how to support her. We didn't talk for weeks, just walking around the house like ghosts. Eventually, we patched things up, but something felt different after that, like we were going through the motions rather than really connecting. So, when the yoga classes started, I wanted to be supportive. If she'd found something that helped her de-stress, great. I wasn't going to get in the way, but it felt strange. My wife had never been the fitness type. She used to joke that her idea of exercise was running late for work. And now, suddenly, she was buying expensive yoga gear, talking about mindfulness, and heading out 3 nights a week. At first, I tried to roll with it. I made jokes like, "Are they teaching yoga or how to join a cult?" Normally, she would have laughed and played along. But this time, she just brushed me off with a curt, "It's good for stress," before grabbing her keys and heading out. Then came the late nights. She'd come home well after 9 p.m., too late for any yoga class I'd ever heard of. I tried to be casual about it, asking how her session was, but her answers were always short and vague. "Good," she'd say, or "relaxing." When I pressed her for details, she'd change the subject. The phone thing started around the same time. She was glued to it like never before, taking it everywhere, even the bathroom. That wasn't like her at all. I mean, this was the same woman who used to leave her phone lying around for days without even realizing it. Now, if I so much as glanced at it, she'd snap, "It's private." I tried to convince myself I was being paranoid. After everything we'd been through, I didn't want to believe there was anything seriously wrong. But the signs were piling up. My wife, the same woman who couldn't commit to a week of meal prep, was now religiously going to yoga 3 times a week and keeping her phone locked down like it held nuclear codes. Yeah, something wasn't adding up. And deep down, I knew it wasn't just yoga. Then there was the phone. Before, she used to leave it lying around like it was a random kitchen appliance. Propped on the couch, forgotten on the nightstand, or buried under a pile of laundry. But now, that thing was practically surgically attached to her hand. She carried it everywhere, even to the shower, which was weird considering she used to let me send texts for her while she drove. The first real red flag was when I casually picked it up off the counter to check the time. She wasn't even in the room, but she bolted back in like a detective about to stop a criminal from tampering with evidence. "Don't touch that. It's private," she snapped, yanking it from my hand. Now, I'm not the kind of guy who immediately assumes the worst, but let's be real. When someone acts like their phone holds the launch codes for a nuclear strike, your instincts kick in. What was private? Who was she protecting? It didn't stop there. She changed the passcode on her phone, which she casually mentioned one morning over breakfast. "Oh, I forgot my old one," she said, staring into her coffee cup like she wasn't lying through her teeth. I laughed it off, but it didn't sit right. And her iPad? Locked now too, even though she only used it to shop for clothes. What really got me, though, were the late-night texts. I'd catch her sitting on the couch, phone tilted just slightly away from my view, fingers flying over the keyboard. One time I asked her who she was talking to, and she didn't even look up. "Just a friend from yoga," she said, shrugging like it was no big deal. I wanted to believe her. I told myself, "You're just paranoid." But here's the thing, my wife didn't make new friends. She wasn't shy or anything, but she'd always been pretty clear that her circle was small, and she liked it that way. The kicker came when she started going out more after yoga. "The girls and I are grabbing coffee," she'd say, or, "We're just catching up." I wanted to believe it, I really did. But when she came home with her hair a little too messy and a smile that looked too bright for just yoga, yeah, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I didn't have proof yet, but her actions spoke louder than words. Something wasn't right, and if I was going to find out what it was, I'd need to be smart. Patience, I told myself. Patience. The truth came to light in the dumbest way possible. And I'm not exaggerating, this was straight out of a bad sitcom. She'd been so careful with her phone, her iPad, even changing her passwords. But the Apple Watch? She forgot that little detail. One morning, she left it on the bathroom counter after her shower. I wasn't trying to snoop, but as I walked in to brush my teeth, the screen lit up with a message. It wasn't even subtle. It said, "Last night was incredible. Can't wait for round 2, babe." Oh, the audacity. Babe? I stared at the watch, hoping for some other explanation. Maybe it was spam, or maybe I'd misunderstood. But no. There it was, clear as day, complete with a heart emoji and a little winky face at the end. Real original. I stood there, toothbrush in hand, heart pounding. My mind raced, piecing together the late nights, the locked phone, the yoga friends. And now this. It didn't take a detective to figure out what was going on. When she came back into the bathroom, towel wrapped around her, I couldn't hold back. "So," I said, holding up the watch, "how's your yoga instructor these days? Seems like you two are really connecting." Her face went pale. Then came the stammering. What are you talking about? That's not, it's not what it looks like." I raised an eyebrow. "Really? Because it looks like your yoga instructor can't wait for round 2. And that's when she gave me the most Oscar-worthy performance of her life. She gasped, put her hand to her chest, and tried to spin the whole thing. "Oh my God. No, you don't understand. It's just a joke. We've been working on this yoga challenge and we've been joking around. You're overreacting." "A joke?" I said, laughing bitterly. "So, last night was incredible is some kind of plank competition? Tell me, is babe short for beginner's yoga buddy?" Her eyes darted everywhere but me, and she kept insisting it was nothing. But at that moment I knew the truth. The careful excuses, the locked phone, the random late nights. It all made sense. She was lying, and she was terrible at it. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I just stood there, toothbrush still in hand, staring at her while she flailed to cover her tracks. And honestly, watching her squirm like that, it was almost satisfying. Almost. She stood there, half wrapped in her towel, trying to piece together some sort of defense. "Look," she said, throwing her hands up. "It's not what you think, okay? It's just a joke. You're overreacting." I folded my arms. "Overreacting? Your joke is calling you babe and talking about last night being incredible? Tell me, what's the punchline? Because I'm dying to hear it." Her eyes narrowed, and I could see her scrambling for a way out. That's when she flipped the script entirely. "Honestly, I feel trapped, okay?" she said, her voice rising. "I'm tired of walking on eggshells in this marriage. Always feeling like I'm suffocating. Maybe we should see other people." The room went silent. I blinked, letting her words hang in the air. Then I laughed. Not a polite, awkward laugh. A full-on, from-the-gut laugh. "See other people?" I said, wiping a tear from my eye. What is this, a rom-com from hell? Who even says that in real life? She didn't laugh, though. She didn't even look guilty. She crossed her arms and stared me down like I was the one in the wrong. You don't understand, she said, her voice icy. I need something more. You've gotten too comfortable and, honestly, you wouldn't even dare to date anyone else. You're too boring for that. Boring. That word hit like a punch to the gut. Not because I believed it, but because she believed it. After everything we'd been through, supporting her through her family drama, sticking by her during the darkest times of our marriage, she had the nerve to call me boring? I smiled then. Not the kind of smile you give when you're happy, but the kind that comes when you've just decided to burn it all to the ground. All right, I said calmly. Let's see what boring looks like. She raised an eyebrow. What's that supposed to mean? You'll find out, I replied, and I walked out of the bathroom. Because if she thought I was boring, she clearly didn't know me at all. That word stuck with me, boring. Not lazy, not unambitious, not even unloving, boring. It wasn't just an insult. It was a dismissal, a way of reducing everything I'd done in our marriage to nothing. Me, the guy who had stood by her when her family was a walking soap opera, when her mother criticized me for not being a real man, when her father made every family gathering feel like a job interview. The guy who had held her hand through her darkest days, only to be tossed aside like an old pair of socks. Boring? Oh, sweetheart, you had no idea what I was capable of. That night, as she lay in bed scrolling through her phone with her smug little grin, I was wide awake, staring at the ceiling. My mind was racing, but not with sadness or regret. No, it was something darker, calculated, even. If she wanted to see other people, fine. But I wasn't just going to see other people. I was going to see her cousin. And let me be clear, this wasn't some random cousin from her extended family who lived 3 states away. Oh no, I had my sights set on the cousin, the golden child of their clan. You know the type, the one everyone praises at family gatherings, the one who can do no wrong, the one my wife used to talk about with stars in her eyes, saying, she's just so perfect. Perfect. Yeah, she'd do nicely. The thing about her cousin was that she was everything my wife wasn't. Warm, kind, and, most importantly, completely oblivious to the chaos brewing in my marriage. She was the Instagram poster girl for wholesome living, sunset hikes, charity events, and the occasional humble brag about her latest promotion. She wasn't just adored by my wife's family. She was practically worshipped. I knew reaching out to her would be tricky. After all, she had no reason to talk to me, her cousin's husband. But I had a plan. One night, while sitting alone in the living room, I sent her a casual message. Hey, can I get your advice on something? I know this is kind of random, but I really need a fresh perspective. It didn't take long for her to reply. She was eager to help, asking me what was going on. I spun a carefully crafted tale about feeling disconnected in my marriage, about how I wanted to be a better husband but didn't know how. It was just vulnerable enough to seem genuine, but vague enough to keep her from asking too many questions. She fell for it completely. Within days, we were texting regularly. At first, it was innocent advice, friendly chats, and the occasional meme. But I made sure to sprinkle in just enough charm to plant a seed of curiosity. I'd say things like, I've always admired how you handle situations so gracefully. You're so easy to talk to. Compliments that seemed harmless on the surface but hinted at something deeper. And then, slowly but surely, I turned up the heat. It didn't take long for her to suggest meeting up in person to talk things through. I pretended to hesitate, saying I didn't want her to feel caught in the middle of my problems with her cousin. She assured me it was fine, that she just wanted to help. And just like that, the first date was set. We met at a quiet cafe downtown. I showed up wearing my best. I'm trying but not trying too hard outfit. Button-up shirt, rolled sleeves, and just enough cologne to leave an impression. She looked stunning, of course, with her effortless charm and natural beauty. Over coffee, I laid it on thick. I talked about how much I admired her, how I felt stuck in my marriage, and how she was the only person I could trust with something so personal. She listened intently, nodding and offering words of encouragement. But by the end of the conversation, there was something in her eyes, a flicker of intrigue, of curiosity. Fast forward a few weeks, and things had escalated. We started meeting more often. Dinners, walks in the park, even a late-night drive, just to clear my head. I made sure to take a few candid photos of us together. Nothing overtly romantic, but close enough to raise questions. Then, in what might have been my most inspired move, I tagged her in a picture of us having dinner on Instagram. The caption, "Grateful for people who truly listen." It didn't take long for my wife to see it. I was sitting on the couch when she stormed into the room, phone in hand, eyes blazing. "What the hell is this?" she shouted, shoving her screen in my face. "Oh," I said casually, pretending to be surprised. "That's just your cousin. She's been helping me work through some things." "Helping you?" she shrieked. "What the hell kind of help involves fancy dinners?" I shrugged, keeping my voice calm. "Well, you said we should see other people, right? I just figured I'd start with someone who actually seems to care." The look on her face was priceless. Equal parts fury, disbelief, and, dare I say it, jealousy. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I had the upper hand, and I wasn't about to let it go. The confrontation came sooner than I expected. I was sitting in the kitchen scrolling through my phone when she stormed in, clutching her own phone like it was Exhibit A in a courtroom. Her face was flushed, her breathing heavy, and the way she slammed the door behind her, I knew I was in for a show. "Are you seriously dating my cousin?" she screamed, her voice shaking with a mix of rage and disbelief. I leaned back in my chair, calmly setting my phone down. "Dating?" I said, raising an eyebrow. "That's a strong word." Then, with the most casual tone I could muster, I added, "I'm just exploring my options. You know, like you said." She froze for a moment, her mouth opening and closing like she was trying to form a sentence, but couldn't quite find the words. I could almost see the gears in her head turning, trying to figure out how to respond. "You're insane," she finally spat. "This is so different. I said we should see other people, not your cousin?"
He interrupted, finishing her sentence for her.
I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table, and gave her a slow, deliberate smile. "Oh, sorry. I must have missed the part where you got to set the rules for my exploration." Her face twisted in fury. "You're doing this to humiliate me." "Am I?" I said, tilting my head. "Or are you just upset that you're not the only one who can play the game?" She looked like she wanted to throttle me, her hands clenching into fists at her sides. I could tell she was about to lose it, but she was holding back, probably because deep down, she knew she didn't have a leg to stand on. Not after her whole speech about freedom and feeling trapped. "You're pathetic," she finally hissed, her voice low and venomous. "You think this makes you look clever? It just proves how weak you are." That one stung a little, but I wasn't about to let her see that. Instead, I shrugged. "If that's what you think," I said, standing up from my chair. "But let's be real here. You're not upset because of what I'm doing. You're upset because you thought I wouldn't dare." She didn't respond, but the flicker of guilt in her eyes was all the confirmation I needed. She'd underestimated me. She'd banked on me being the boring husband who'd let her walk all over me. But now, the tables had turned, and she didn't know what to do with herself. I grabbed my car keys and started heading for the door. She called after me, her voice shaking. "Where are you going?" "To meet your cousin," I said without looking back. "She's actually pretty fun to be around. You should try it sometime." And with that, I walked out, leaving her standing there, speechless. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I was finally in control. Now, I could have left things as they were. My wife already knew I was seeing her cousin, and the look on her face when she realized I'd turned her little "see other people" stunt into a full-blown family scandal was satisfying enough. But here's the thing. I didn't just want to hurt her. I wanted to destroy her carefully crafted image of control, to shatter the smug confidence she'd carried throughout this whole mess. So I started planning. If there was one thing my wife's family couldn't stand, it was scandal. They were all about appearances. Sunday brunches, perfectly curated family photos, polite small talk that hid years of unresolved grudges. And her dad? Oh, he hated cheaters. He once stopped talking to his own brother for 10 years because he caught him fooling around with the neighbor. A cheater in his own family? That would send him into a full-blown meltdown. I decided to host a dinner at our house. Just a little get-together to catch up. I invited her parents, her cousin, of course, and a couple of other relatives. I made sure to emphasize how important it was for everyone to come. Especially her dad, who was the guest of honor. "You're going to love this," I told him over the phone, my voice practically dripping with sincerity. Meanwhile, I kept up appearances with her cousin. We were still seeing each other casually, but I was careful not to let her in on the full extent of my plan. I needed her there, looking radiant and clueless, to really set the stage. The date was set. The menu was planned. All I had to do now was wait for the night to arrive. The night of the dinner, everything was perfect. I'd cleaned the house, cooked a roast, and set the table with the good china. Something we hadn't used since our wedding anniversary. My wife, though clearly uneasy about having her cousin there, didn't dare protest. She couldn't exactly explain why she didn't want her parents and cousin in the same room without exposing herself. The tension was palpable as everyone sat down to eat. Her dad, seated at the head of the table, was in a cheerful mood, which made what I was about to do even better. Midway through the meal, I decided it was time to start dropping hints. "You know," I said casually, pouring a glass of wine for my wife's cousin, "it's really nice to see you again. We've been spending so much time together lately. It feels like I see you more than I see my own wife." The room went quiet for a moment. Her cousin gave me a slightly confused smile, while my wife shot me a glare that could have melted steel. Her parents, thankfully oblivious, just chuckled politely. But the real kicker came during dessert. As I cleared the plates, I brought out a bouquet of roses and handed it to my wife with a big smile. "For you," I said, "to show my appreciation for everything you do." She looked suspicious, her eyes narrowing as she took the bouquet. But she forced a smile and said, "Thanks. That's sweet." That smile didn't last long. As she pulled the flowers out of the vase, a delicate piece of black lace tumbled out and landed on her plate. Her cousin's underwear. The room froze. Her mom let out a small gasp. Her dad stared at the table like he was trying to process what just happened. And her cousin's face turned a deep shade of red. "Oh, oops," I said, leaning down to pick them up. "Must have gotten mixed up. Sorry about that." I handed the lace back to her cousin with an apologetic smile, like it was the most natural thing in the world. My wife's face? Priceless. If looks could kill, I'd have been vaporized on the spot. But she didn't say a word. She couldn't. Not with her dad sitting right there, slowly piecing together the puzzle. And this was only the beginning. Her dad looked like he was about to combust. His face turned a violent shade of red, and his voice boomed through the dining room as he slammed his hand on the table. "What the hell is this?" he barked, his eyes darting between my wife and the rest of us. My wife froze like a deer in headlights. Her voice cracked as she stammered, I don't know. It's not what you think." The tension in the room was suffocating. Her mom was gripping her wine glass so tightly I thought it might shatter, while her cousin was looking anywhere but at me, probably wondering if she could just disappear through the floor. I let the silence hang for a moment before leaning forward. "Oh, I can clear this up," I said, pulling my phone out of my pocket. "This isn't about the lace, Percy. It's about these." I unlocked my phone, scrolled to the screenshots, and slid it across the table toward her dad. On the screen were the texts between my wife and her so-called yoga instructor. Every incriminating word there for him to see. Her dad squinted at the screen, his jaw tightening as he read. Last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you again, babe. Miss you already. Wish I was in bed with you right now. He looked up at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of rage and disbelief. Yoga instructor? He said slowly, his voice dripping with contempt. Is this some kind of sick joke? My wife's face went pale, her hands trembling as she reached for the phone. This isn't real, she blurted out. Someone must have hacked my phone. This isn't me. Her dad let out a bitter laugh, the kind of laugh that made it clear he didn't believe a single word. Hacked? Are you kidding me? He roared, slamming the phone back onto the table. How stupid do you think we are? I sat back, watching the fallout unfold with a sense of grim satisfaction. I'd done my part. Now it was her turn to try and explain herself. Her dad wasn't done. You have the nerve to sit here and lie to my face? He bellowed, his fist pounding the table again. After everything? What the hell were you thinking? Her mom, who had been silently clutching her glass, finally spoke up. Is this true? She asked, her voice trembling. Are you really cheating on him? My wife's lips quivered as the tears started streaming down her face. She broke into full-on sobs, shaking her head as if she could deny the evidence in front of her. It's not what it looks like, she wailed, her voice cracking. I couldn't help myself. It's exactly what it looks like, I said, my voice calm and measured. You've been sneaking around with your yoga instructor, while lecturing me about being boring and telling me we should see other people. Well, congratulations. You got what you wanted. Her cousin, bless her heart, was doing her best to keep a straight face, but I caught the corners of her mouth twitching like she was trying not to laugh. She coughed into her hand, avoiding eye contact with anyone, but the damage was done. My wife snapped her head toward her, her face a mix of fury and humiliation. This isn't funny, she screamed, her voice shrill. Oh, it's not funny, her cousin said, managing to compose herself. But wow, you really screwed this one up, didn't you? Her dad stood, his chair scraping loudly against the floor as he pushed it back. You disgust me, he spat, shaking his head. I raised you better than this. I don't even want to look at you right now. Her mom let out a small gasp, her hand covering her mouth as tears welled in her eyes. The room was crumbling around my wife, and all she could do was sit there, sobbing, as the weight of her lies came crashing down. The room was already in shambles. Her dad was pacing, her mom was tearing up, and my wife was an absolute mess, sobbing and trying to find a way to explain the unexplainable. But I wasn't done. Oh no. Leaning back in my chair, I gave my wife a calm, almost sympathetic look. You know, I said, swirling the last bit of wine in my glass. The saddest part of all this isn't even what you did to me. It's what you did to him. She sniffled, looking confused. Him? Yeah, your yoga instructor. Because when I send these screenshots to his wife, he's going to have a much worse night than you. The silence was deafening. Her face went completely blank, like her brain had short-circuited. Her dad stopped pacing and turned to glare at her with fresh outrage. Wait a minute, he growled. He's married. I nodded, holding up my phone. Oh yeah, lovely woman. 2 kids, too. She's going to love these. Her dad exploded. Are you out of your goddamn mind? You're not just a cheater. You're a homewrecker, too. He stormed out of the room, muttering something about how he needed to get some air before he did something stupid. Her mom just sat there, shaking her head. I don't even know who you are anymore, she whispered, her voice thick with disappointment. And her cousin? Oh, she stayed quiet through the whole thing, barely suppressing a smirk as she picked at the dessert I'd made. She even leaned over and whispered, "This is better than TV." When no one was looking, my wife tried to argue, to plead, but her voice was drowned out by the chaos. By the end of the night, she looked like a shell of the woman who had walked into that room, and I was finally feeling pretty damn good. The very next day, She packed a bag and left. Not because I asked her to. She probably thought she could cool things down and come back later, but I didn't lift a finger to stop her. Watching her drag her suitcase out the door was the most satisfying moment of my life. She called me that evening, crying. "I'm so sorry," she sobbed. "I made a mistake. I didn't know what I was doing. Please, we can fix this." I didn't yell, I didn't argue. I just let her talk herself in circles until she ran out of words. Then I said, "You're right about one thing. You did make a mistake. You underestimated me." She tried to reply, but I hung up before she could. Within a week, the divorce papers were filed. I wasn't going to drag this out or give her a chance to wiggle her way back into my life. Every time she called or texted, I ignored it. When she showed up at the house, I didn't answer the door. It was over. Meanwhile, her cousin and I kept seeing each other. Not because I thought it would lead to something serious, but because it was the ultimate twist of the knife. Every time I posted a photo of us together, I knew it was driving my wife insane. Of course, it didn't last. Her cousin was sweet, but we both knew it was more of a revenge fling than a real relationship. When we parted ways, it was mutual, and honestly, I think she enjoyed the drama as much as I did. But my ex? Well, she didn't get off so easy. From what I've heard, her relationship with her family is still on thin ice, and as for the yoga instructor, let's just say his wife didn't take the news kindly. Sometimes karma just works out.